I don't know, perhaps Delhi. Perhaps Delhi.
Namaste, Peeyush. How are you doing?
Namaste. I'm good. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Good to see you. Good to see you, my friend. I'm happy you're here. You know, this is one session which is going to be so powerful because everything is around stories. You know, I love to teach storytelling, and I like to take them through the process of the big idea. Um, you know, um, objection, prevention, mechanism, building up stories. So this is fantastic because this is something that, conservation starts to happen when you get sensitized, when you get moved and you hear those stories and you want to be there yourself. So this is lovely. And welcome, and thank you for being here. Thank you, friends. Thank you. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. How are you, Salil? How are you, Mahesh? There are many friends who are joining in right now. We'll wait for them. Shamji, Hari, Charu, Sharad, Amiral. Welcome, friends. Welcome, Srinivas, Lalita, Rohit. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here. This super special webinar that you've come for. Peeyush, of course, I'm going to introduce Peeyush to you and tell you all about him when I read out his introduction, but I'll still wait for another minute or so. You might want to say hi to them, Peeyush.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming in. I'm quite overwhelmed at seeing this interest. And, I guess thanks a lot of Mohit to offer this space and time. I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Peeyush, it's so beautiful that, a lot of us, who are nature lovers or conservationist researchers, we're finding time to associate with each other, to do our bonding through these webinars. And it's okay if we can't get to the field. It's okay if we are not in the jungles really. But we're not wasting our time worrying about, hey, what's going to happen tomorrow, what's not going to happen. Junglis couldn't be bothered, they are happy connecting through any which way, with wildlife and nature. And so that's the plus point. We, as wildlife people, you never have to worry about what's going to happen tomorrow, because whatever is going to happen now. So this is brilliant. Great.
Absolutely.
So friends, I'm going to read out his introduction to you quickly, and it's really, really noteworthy. So please pay attention if you can. Peeyush Sekhsaria is a development professional, an architect by training. He has a master's in mud architecture, an MPhil in geography from Sorbonne, Paris. He believes in working with the culture of the community close to the ground through ownership of the target communities. I need to wear my specs because, sorry friends. His first love is nature, and he tries to find ways to work in that space. In the environment space, his writings have been published in The Indian Express, in The Business Line, Ground Glass Sustain, Century Asia, and The Wire. His writing for children are published in Hindi, in Cycle, and he writes a monthly column Eureka for the Hindu Young World. He photographed and wrote for the Greenpeace India publication, Safeguard or Squander, Deciding the Future of India's Fisheries. He is the co-author for the children's book, Our Tigers Return, the story of the Panda Tiger Reserve. Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you, Peeyush. Thank you for letting all of us know more about you. And I'll quickly talk about myself, especially for those who don't know me. I am Mohit Agarwal. I'm an experiential ecotourism specialist with a deep love for nature. I help people travel to some wonderful places in Asia. I'm on the board of Asian Ecotourism Network, and I've been trained and certified by GSTC in sustainable tourism. I'm the founder of Asian Adventures, a 27-year-old outfit travel outfit. It's the largest bird watching tour company in India. I'm also the founder of Netinator. It's a value email marketing company. These companies are on a large mission to help Asian elephants with their corridors, free the Himalayas of plastic waste, help small wildlife NGOs, and also save the ancient Himalayan shrines. So that was a bit about Peeyush and a bit about me. Friends, I won't take much of your time now. Over to you, Peeyush. Please unfold your magic. Let's get started.
Thank you, Mohit, and thank you for giving me this platform and creating this platform. I've listened in on a couple of talks, and I've really found them very interesting. And like you rightly said, these are difficult times, and we try and do what we can to keep ourselves a bit in higher spirits and, of course, positive to the extent possible. Now, actually, Mohit has given me a slightly onerous task, and that is, sort of sharing with you my story of storytelling in conservation. What I'm basically going to do today is to talk to you about storytelling, or my experience of storytelling, using a body of work which has developed over almost a decade now. It sort of represents to a certain extent the way I've tried to approach storytelling, or how storytelling has happened to me, and how this sort of dynamic relationship has developed between the idea of storytelling, its different forms. And of course, I think I still have a long way to go, but I'm more than happy to share whatever I've learned and seen along the way. Before I continue, I want to actually ask you all to use the chat box and respond to these very simple questions. Is that, how many of you like listening to stories? You can answer with a simple Y in the chat box. If anybody is having difficulty in locating the chat box, at least on my screen, it's on the right hand side. Okay, so not surprisingly, it's an overwhelming yes. Now, my second question is, how many of you are into storytelling? How many of you are actually telling stories? Again, please answer me in a yes or a no. How many of you are into storytelling? Yes or no? The responses seem to have slowed down a bit. Okay, great. I can see that while there are a fair number of people who are saying yes, the number of no's have gone up. And, it may seem a little naive, but the way I see it is that, if we all of us want to listen to stories and love storytelling in terms of a recipient, and we are not really telling stories, then at a very simple level, the number of stories being told are going to go down. And I feel that all of us are storytellers. We do it perhaps sometimes without realizing it, and of course, sometimes consciously. And as we go along in this story of mine, I'm also going to request all of you to reflect on your own journey as storytellers, which probably you are already on, or that you're going to take on, hopefully inspired by this discussion. Okay, now let me just figure out how I go to the next slide. Right. Okay. So this story actually started with a sort of challenge. I live in Delhi, and I had a friend who works extensively in the Central Indian landscape who was passing by. This is about 10 years back. His name is Sanjay Thakur, and he had just come back from Panda Tiger Reserve, and he told me that, Panda tigers have come back. Panda is a real success story. And I said, oh, really? I thought Panda was finished. And he sort of chided me a little, upset, saying that, Peeyush, people like you claim to be nature lovers and actually you don't know what's happening on the ground. Panna is an amazing turnaround. It's an amazing turnaround story. And, almost spontaneously I told him, oh, really? That's great. But then why don't people know this? Why don't people like me know this? We should do something about it. And he challenged me and said, then do something. Who's stopping you? And that was the trigger actually to set off on this journey. And I had done some work earlier for children's manuals on a bit of the development space, and he knew of it, and he said, why don't you think of writing a book for children? I'll put you in touch with Mr. Murthy, who was then the park director and also the architect of the revival of Panna. So this initial sort of challenge that he threw at me resulted in me, traveling to Panna and meeting Mr. Murthy. Sorry. And, at a certain level, you could say that the story of Panna was that of first going anti-clockwise, that is tigers reducing to eventually there being just one male left, and the forest department deciding to do something about it, and then the revival plan coming in, tigers being reintroduced, and then the story basically goes in the clockwise manner where from one, the tiger numbers start increasing. And for somebody from the outside, it could just appear like this, that yes, it was a bad scene, and now tigers are back, thank God. But of course, the minute you start engaging with the story, you start obviously learning that there's so many finer aspects, nuances, stories within stories that are worth talking about, that are worth narrating. So the way it happened is that I traveled to Panna. Mr. Murthy was in a very busy schedule that day, and he promised me that he will give me 15 minutes. I landed up at his office, and we actually sat maybe at least for a couple of hours where he narrated the whole story of Panna's revival. This is roughly around 2012 or 13, if I remember right. And the Panna revival story was already making its rounds a bit across the country then. And we sort of loosely agreed. I also showed him some of the work I had done earlier. We sort of agreed that we'll do a book for children. We didn't really know what shape it would take. We didn't know where we would raise the money from. We were not sure what the content would be. But we agreed that we will do a children's book. Okay. And in some ways, this content, so of course the content, in a way, the fundamental thing was this unique and fabulous revival of tigers, which had not happened anywhere else in the country or in the world. But within that, you have to have content. There are people, there are failures and successes and so on. So we started off, I had the opportunity of actually accompanying him on some of his field work. And one of the things I started picking up is the people, the guards, the teams that track tigers, the equipment. And in some ways, for somebody who works in the wildlife space, this may seem like every day. But for people outside, I think this is the demystification. This is what happens actually to, to bring about success, which I wanted to sort of bring about. And here you can see one of the teams that is tracking one particular tigress. And very interestingly, I was also invited for a tiger happy birthday. And I didn't really know of it till then. But 16th of April, which actually is just about 4 weeks back, is celebrated as a unique tiger happy birthday, and which signifies a very special event in the story of Panna, which I'll come to later. And what was most moving for me in this function is that the function, of course, was a celebration of you could say, the rebirth of tigers, but it was also a celebration of the field staff and the other people who are involved with Panna, And there was this very humble sort of or humbling experience where school students offered flowers to the field staff, and you could see the surprise and the happiness in their eyes. And you know, to think that there is in the heart of a tiger reserve a tiger birthday being celebrated with so much grace was also quite an eye opener. And so all these things started providing me with the material that would become part of the story. Of course, Mr. Murthy was very much part of this churning or this story that was coming together. And as we sort of got the content, we started now thinking of what is going to be the narrative format. And you know, it's a story which in some ways is linear, because you're starting with the starting point is clearly defined, where the tigers of Panna have virtually disappeared, and then you see a revival. So it's a linear story. It's a happy ending sort of story. But how do you narrate it? So we basically came up with this idea. I'll introduce these two gentlemen here on the left. The person on the left is Devi Datta Chaturvedi, and in the middle is Ambika Khare. These are retired school teachers from Panna. And amazingly enough, when I met Khare sir, he was probably 83 years old, and Chaturvedi sir was about 75. And at that age, they were conducting nature camps inside Panna Tiger Reserve for roughly 16 weekends from November to February, year after year. And we decided that we are going to start the story with these two gentlemen actually talking about how fascinating it will be to hear the story of Panna. And to make this an interesting narrative, we created, or rather we recycled in the sustainable way, this character whom we call Megha. Megha is a little girl from one of the villages close to Panna. She's been part of the Panna nature camps, and she's a young, smart girl, happy to ask questions, curious. And the Sutradhar of sorts naturally was Mr. Murthy, the park director. And we basically built up the story as a narrative between Megha and Mr. Murthy. Now, how did Megha come about? So the reality is that Megha was created for another piece of work we had done. And that work is also available online. It was actually for the Periyar Agastyamalai landscape. And there again, we had created a schoolgirl who asked questions, and there her counterpart was a scientist. So we had a model which we adapted here. And it's also important here to realize that we didn't really have any resources. It was an idea that we were working on. We were hoping to raise resources as we went along. And so in the spirit of sustainability, we decided that we are going to reuse illustrations that we can, of course, with due permission and credit. And so here you see two contributors in this page. One is Deepthi Radhakrishnan, who had created this lovely character for another book, which we thought fit very well with our story here. And while this house serves as her home in the story, these illustrations are by another wildlife biologist called Arjun Srivatsa, who very kindly gave us access to his illustrations. So in the classical sense of the way books are designed, you typically build one visual language. So you have one designer, you have one illustrator. The illustrator builds a visual language including colors and style, look and feel, everything. And here we didn't really have the luxury of doing that. So we basically made sure that we were elaborately illustrating the story, but the illustrations were coming from all different sources. And I will also cite some of these different sources as we go along. So where does the story begin? very quickly, because I'm not really going to narrate the story of Panna's revival here today, but it starts off with a male tiger T3 that had to be brought in because there were no male tigers left in Panna after the initial release. So just to take a step back, there was one male tiger left when the tiger revival plan was put in place. 2 females were brought in, but then the forest department discovered that that male also seemed to have disappeared. So a third male, T3, was brought in. And as soon as T3 is released, what does T3 do? He starts walking out of the park straight away from day one. And this is the first pug mark when he was released out of the safety enclosure at sometime, I think, in November 2009. And then there is this magnificent story of the forest department organizing itself to basically track a needle in a haystack across an open landscape of fields, degraded forest lands, urban areas, rural areas, using elephants, using manpower, jeeps, and of course the entire government machinery and a wide range of stakeholders of this landscape. And as they go along, they have difficulty in actually tracking this tiger because sometimes they're not getting his signal. Sometimes he's in areas that are very difficult to access. And they're talking to locals, they're talking to elder gentlemen in the landscape to understand where a tiger could be if it is there in this landscape. They are engaging with the departments to cut off electricity in certain areas because some of these areas have, farmers using electrical lines to keep wildlife away from their fields. And this tiger manages to travel about 440 kilometers in the direction, believe it or not, of the tiger reserve he was brought from. So he was brought to Panna from Pench, and obviously he was brought in, I think, by air or by road. And when he started moving out, the initial thought was that maybe he is moving towards Bandhavgarh. And then as he oriented and reoriented himself, they started realizing that he is actually traveling towards Pench. And this was the first time that there was a documentation of the homing instinct in tigers. And this was actually a very unusual incident because just imagine a tiger being displaced like this and actually trying to find his way back. Finally, the department was able to track him and tranquilize him, and he was in good condition. He was brought back to Panna, and there is of course a lot more, because what stopped him from moving out when he was re-released in Panna, but the relocation worked. T3 mated with T1, and on 16th April 2010, the first litter comprising 4 cubs was discovered by the forest department. And that day is celebrated as a Tiger Happy Birthday in Panna. Of course, I'm just giving you a gist of the story. For knowing the finer details, you'll have to buy the book. So, for me, listening to the story from Mr. Murthy was like an eye-popping exercise, in the sense, where have you heard of anything similar in the world? And this was happening right here in our backyard in Panna. Nobody knew of it, or rather I would say a lot of people didn't know of it. And there was this fabulous story that had happened, and there were a few years that had passed. And there clearly was, a mind-blowing story here to narrate. And of course, not just that of the tigers, but of the people involved, and so many other stories within stories, like I said. So right from the beginning, we were very clear that we wanted to do an English and a Hindi version of the book. For us, I think what was very important is that the story of Panna should be alive amongst the people of Panna. And when we say people of Panna, it's the people who live in the immediate surroundings in the districts of Damoh, Chhatarpur, Panna, children, adults. There was, a lot of animosity between the Tiger Reserve and the people around it. And this is nothing new for people who are in the conservation circles. Tiger reserves and protected areas are often looked upon by the people around them as liabilities, as problems, as things that are exclusionary, and there's so many other things that we all often come across in field. So for us, it was very important that while the story should also reach out to a wider national, international, English-speaking audience, it was definitely more important for us that the story also remains alive amongst this landscape. So from that perspective, doing a Hindi version of the book was very important, and we worked on it in parallel. Let me also quickly read out a few credits because it would be unfair not to do it. Of course, Rangaiah Srinivasa Murthy sir, who was then the park director and the architect of the Panna revival. Then Aniruddha Ghosh, who played designer and illustrator. He did the cover and he did the characters. Deepti Radhakrishnan, there's Aditya Vikram Singh, who also very kindly, voluntarily did illustrations for us. Arjun Srivatsa, and the Center for Environment Education, who also gave us access to their illustrations. Then we had Shashi Jha and Parikshit Suryavanshi, who helped with the translation. There's Arun Singh also, who helped with the Hindi translation. Of course, the Tiger Reserve staff, Nikhil Nagle, Vidya Venkatesh, Bhavna Menon from Last Wilderness, who actually played publishers, and other staff from the Tiger Reserve, whose photographs we used, other forest officers. All of them played a very important role, and I cannot really list all the people involved, but there were many other people who were very intimately involved with the making of this book. Now, there are 2-3 things here, I think, which are important for us to remember as we go along. It wasn't easy to put the book together. It was a bit like a madcap idea. Mr. Murthy was extremely busy as the park director, as you can imagine, a very senior bureaucrat. I was doing this on the side. I was working as a consultant in the development sector, and I was finding time to do this. We didn't have any money to pay illustrators. We didn't really have any resources, at least when we started off, to pay the designer. And we were sort of going along with this idea driven by the fact that we wanted to put the story out, that the story was important to be told. And as we went along, we found partners. So we found somebody, actually, Mr. Murthy found somebody through another bureaucrat who worked in the region, who helped raise resources for the printing and at least paying the designer and the translators. Last Wilderness stepped in to play publisher. And if I'm not mistaken, on 16 November 2015, Mr. Murthy organized an event in Panna, which was actually like a big event for Panna town, which was built around the release of this book. And while one may think that, what's the need for such a big event to release a book, etc., this was really something that I got a lot to learn as to how you can take people along with you. So we had a day event which was on something that was very Panna specific, which is a river called Kilkila and its pollution. So there was a sort of march with banners where young people, old people participated, and the evening was this large function in the Panna Tiger Reserve headquarters in Panna, where a large gathering of people, maybe 500 people had turned up. There were lots of children, there was all the forest department staff, there was representation from the political and the ruling class. And we had this event where the book was released. And of course, there were many memorable events, but the one I want to talk about is this young boy who came up and spoke about his love for tigers, his love for Panda. And I caught up with him, just after the event got over. And he said, Bhaiya, maine kitab pad li. I finished reading the book. And it was fascinating because the kind of enthusiasm this event generated, this interest it generated, and of course, a lot of the copies got distributed during this event. Now the question is that once you do the book, the traditional way of dispersal, if I may use the ecological term, is that you have a publisher, you have bookshops, you have Amazon, you put it online, people buy, you take part in fairs, you give talks, and so on. But if we have to really reach a sort of audience on ground, then we don't really have all those avenues available to us. And since we were thinking of what we could do, there was some thought building up even otherwise while we were working on the book. But here, a very important thing that happened, partly planned and I think partly evolutionary, was that we sort of tapped into the Panda nature camps. Now, I should quickly give you a background of the Panda nature camps. I'm also keeping a tab on time. So Panda nature camps were actually started as a measure to address this sort of animosity that people have towards the park. And it was a brainchild of Mr. Murthy. He set it up with Sanjay Thakur, and the first year he actually ran the camps, and they also ran a week-long training and selection camp for teachers who would conduct the camps. And at the end of the camp, 80-year-old young Ambika Khare and 70-year-old young Devidatta Chaturvedi were actually selected to run the camps. And these two young gentlemen, were a terrific inspiration. Their sense of humor, their sense of poise, their ease with children, the respect that they had in that landscape. And they ran these camps, and typically, and these nature camps are a good subject for a separate talk, but from the first Sunday of November till the last Sunday of February, so it's actually Sundays over 4 months, winter months, where about 30 participants were picked up from Panna early in the morning, and they spent the whole day in the park, including indoor and outdoor sessions. And this is done at a small fees, and they get a small kit, which includes a cap, a small bag, a notepad, etc. And thanks to the efforts of WWF that supports this along with the Forest Department and the Forest Department, we were actually able to include the book as part of the kit. And since the book's publication in 2015, except I think 1 year, all years, we've been able to organize a copy of the book for the children, including a year when we actually crowdfunded for it. So we actually raised money through a crowdfunding campaign for about 500 books, where we were able to raise about 550,000 rupees. So this was one way of reaching out to children in that landscape. And over a period of at least the time since the book has been released, my guess is we've had about 2,000 children going through these camps, which is not a small number for that landscape. And as the story proceeds, this remarkable work that both these teachers were doing, we nominated them for the Green Teacher Award for Sanctuary Asia Awards, and which they got in 2016. And it, of course, was a matter of great pride for them, but also for us. And I think, in the conservation space, we are very urban-centric. And actually, the real work, I wouldn't say that urban folks are not doing real work, but I think there's lots of solid real work that happens on ground. And I think it's up to all of us to recognize those efforts and give them the right platform. And in a small way, we were very happy to create this space for Ambika Khare sir and Chaturvedi sir. Chaturvedi sir was a little unwell and he couldn't go for the function himself, but you can see Ambika Khare sir receiving the awards in 2016. Also, what happens is that when you start engaging with the landscape, you start coming to know different things. And there was this amazing story of the tigresses T4 and T5. And when I came to know of the passing away of actually both, I wrote a piece which was published by the Indian Express, and which actually, is, one could probably make a film on it. It's that kind of story. You have two tigress cubs found often when their mother is killed in a territorial fight or is attacked by a male. The forest department decides to bring them up with minimal human imprint, and at a fairly senior age in terms of tiger lives, I think around 3 years, they are brought into Panna and released in the wild, and they actually rewild. They've been doing a little bit of hunting in their enclosure in Kanha, but they rewild, killing wild animals like boar and sambar. They mate, they produce litters, and starting from being orphan cubs that are almost certain to go to a zoo, to trace a journey which was probably a little short-lived. I would have liked them to have lived longer. And so these kind of amazing stories also started coming out of that association, and to the extent possible, I tried to give them a platform. And also, there's this whole community of drivers, guides, forest field staff, and we teamed up in this case with one guide called RP Omre, a dear friend, and who helped us actually get the book to, again, I think we did 100 copies, 200 drivers, guides, and field staff. And it probably is not enough. There's scope to do more, there's need to do more. But again, here we raised resources. We did a crowdfunding campaign. We told people what we're raising money for. And we raised money for the book, and we made sure that these reached the hands of this community of people. And in all our national parks and all our tiger reserves, there is this cross-section of people who are actually serving the park, serving us as visitors, but who often don't necessarily have access to good information about their own park. And this was a small attempt in that direction. What happens when you get invited to do a storytelling session for children? So I had this challenge, and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to go there and going to read out of the book, and the children are going to be like damn bored. And this space that is organizing this event is going to charge some money from the kids and their parents. And I was like panic stricken. And that's when it struck me that I need to do something that is fun and interesting. And I developed a small toolkit of sorts where I created a quiz, a multiple choice answer quiz, a craft activity which I called Bringing a Dead Tiger Alive. You can see the dead tiger on the left, and you can see the tiger alive on the right, which is basically a coloring, cutting and folding exercise, very simple folds. It's taken off the web, but then I modified it slightly to simplify the curves and the cutting and the coloring to a certain extent. And this then sort of gave other ideas. So, for example, the sloth bear you see here was developed for a friend who works on sloth bears. And we developed a similar kit for him for use in his landscape. And similarly, we've developed a kit for leopards. And we are halfway through for snow leopards. So, one thing leads to the other. And a couple of years back, we had some money, some small money from the sale of the book. And we decided to go back to Panda and do a teacher's training program with Samavesh, which works in the landscape, with Ambika Khare sir, Chatuveri sir, and the schools that they are associated with, and with the forest department. And we did a training session which was over 2 days for about 40 school teachers, introducing them to different tools. Also, we did a field trip with the Parthi community with the help of Last Wilderness. The Parthi community is a story of its own in the Panna landscape, and Last Wilderness and the forest department have been doing some fabulous work with them. I would suggest that Mohit invite them also to speak about their work. So here you see people doing some fun stuff, introducing themselves, making stuff, responding to quizzes, being out in nature. And I got a chance to be part of a small shadow puppetry workshop. And I decided to use it. It was over a weekend. I decided to use it to make a film on the story of Panna's revival. I'm going to play it for you. Let me mute myself first.
Our Tigers Return. A true story of the revival of Panna Tiger Reserve. Panna is located in Madhya Pradesh, close to Khajuraho. Panna was especially known for its large tigers. Panna's largest tiger measured a cool 11 feet 3 inches from nose to tail. In the 2000s, Panna's tigers started dwindling. Finally, just one male tiger remained. The forest department decided to reintroduce 2 tigresses. T1 from Bandhavgarh and T2 from Kanha. Disaster struck. The only male had disappeared. They decided to release another male tiger, T3 from Pench. Immediately, T3 started moving away from the park. T3 moved a good 442 kilometers before he was recaptured. What if T3 moved away again? Tigers use urine to mark their presence. Female urine from the Bhopal Zoo was sprayed in T3's area. The trick worked. T3 stayed, met T1, and they mated. On April 16, 2010, T1 had delivered 4 cubs. Tigers had returned to Panna.
You're on mute, Peeyush. You need to unmute yourself.
Thanks. Sorry. So I hope you could watch the video well, and there was no time lag between the audio and the video, because at my end I couldn't really understand how it was playing for you all. But anyway, this was a sort of fun thing, which of course again thanks to so many people who helped. The voiceover has been done by a friend. The editing, the sound bites from different people actually helped to make this video, and we released it a couple of years back on the 16th of April, celebrating the birthday or the happy birthday of Panna. I'm just going to go back to my slides. Okay, I think I'll have to, right. And in a way, going full circle in 2019, it was 10 years for the fantastic journey of T3. And Mr. Murthy actually led a 10-day sort of, you could say, journey where we followed the path taken by T3, and I was able to join this journey. And I used, of course, different people there was a film crew, there were people who were doing a lot of photographs. I decided to sort of try and do quick portraits of the different people who played a role in that work, including forest guards, farmers, and these are some portraits from that journey that I was part of. There's been a plan for 2 years now to do something with this, but it hasn't really gone beyond this one slide. I hope I get the inspiration to do something more concrete out of this. And also during the same journey, I came across this beautiful elephant called Vatsala. She perhaps is the oldest living Asian elephant in the world. And I titled the story as Vatsala with 5 legs, because her trunk actually comes down to the ground almost like a 5th leg. And this was also a very interesting story in itself, because when I first met her or heard about her, yes, it was interesting to know, but there still was something lacking. And then I actually met a retired range forest officer from Satpura, and he talked to me about Vatsala, an elephant Vatsala. And I said, come on, this has to be the same elephant. And we started talking. And he told me about what happened during the years that she was in Satpura. So this is an elephant that spends a major part of her life in a forest division in Kerala. She's brought to Satpura, where she is, at that point in time, there was lots of logging happening. So she's basically a logging elephant. And when it's decided to move her to Panna, she's to move actually with her best pal, another elephant. And when the trucks arrive, her pal refuses to climb into the truck, and Vatsala does. And so, all of a sudden like this, Vatsala gets separated from her closest pal and travels to Panna. And she's been there for over 20 years. And there's some fabulous care that has been taken by the veterinary doctor and the Panna team, that Vatsala is still in good health. And it's a story of its own. I'll be happy to share the link with Mohit so that you all can read it. And I'm sort of coming to the close of my presentation. I have to sadly say that Ambika Khareji passed away on the 16th of April last month. He was a great supporter of Panna, and for people in the tiger or the wildlife space, he'll be remembered for his role in running the Panna nature camps. But he was an institution for Panna, running I don't know how many ideas and so many people that he inspired. And it was just poignant that he actually passed away on the same day as the tiger birthday for Panna is celebrated. Maybe giving us a message there about something. Well, of course, there are other stories, some of which I'm not in a position to share now because we are probably going to release them soon and I have to keep them under wraps. But there is one which I'm going to share. We are currently working on a book, again in Hindi, on the Great Indian Bustard. This is with the Ecology and Rural Development Society, headed by Sumit Dukia and his wife Mamta Rawat. They're doing some really solid work with community in the desert. And these lovely illustrations are by Sneha Malini. The book is actually in the design phase, and we're also developing a game with it, which talks of the biodiversity of the Thar. And COVID has been a bit of a bummer, just like for all of us. So we are a bit behind schedule. But I think in a month or so, we'll have our final copies ready. With this, I'll close this presentation. The book is available for sale in case somebody is interested. I've put the link here, but I'm also happy to share it with Mohit separately. And in case you all want to get in touch, I've shared my email address and phone. Thanks everybody for listening, and Mohit, over to you.
What a brilliant presentation. It was so moving, Peeyush, it was absolutely fantastic. And I think it's really important for people to know the power of storytelling. So storytelling can be a fiction, it can be the real story, it needs to move every generation from their own way of being into another dimension, another world, where everything, like for example, the shirt that I'm wearing or the t-shirt you're wearing or anything that's happened in this world is because somebody had a dream, somebody concocted a story, and somebody actually manifested it into the reality. So for example, when Peeyush is talking about T3 and T1 and the Cubs being born and Panna becoming a success story, right? So there's hope, there is positivity, there is creation, there is way forward. I think it's absolutely stunning that and everybody has storytelling powers. It's just that we shy away from articulating, we shy away from writing it down. And I'll tell you, I was a great storyteller, but I could never write. So I met this lady in Princeton who was also the wife of my guru in 1989. And she said, Mohit, just start writing. Just start putting down your thoughts. Don't worry about whether it's right or wrong, whether you put it in the right sequence or not. Just start writing. And the moment I started to write, I started to clear my thoughts. And then my stories became even better. So if you've got stories related to conservation, this is the need of the hour. So go ahead and tell the world what you know. I'll tell you a small story quickly. Vivek Menon, a friend of mine, we were in college together, and he found a kitten from somewhere, and he brought it home. And this kitten had this very peculiar habit of leaning against the sofa with his legs up and going to sleep. And he knew where his bowl was for water and for food. 3 months later, the entire family was going to Coimbatore or to Palghat for a holiday. And they said, Mohit, you could take this kitten home, and then when we come back, bring him home. I said, okay, we'll do that. And I took that kitten to Ghaziabad. And then, somehow it wasn't familiar with it. It was just playful. Next day in the morning, it was gone. I didn't know where it went. So that time there were no mobile phones. So I called up, I booked a trunk call, and I spoke to Vivek, and he was heartbroken. He says, you lost my kitten. I said, I'm really sorry, I can't find it. 2 years later, we found a big cat in Sekhsaria, sitting outside the door, and the moment he opened, he just walked straight in, sat on the sofa, and just the way that kitten used to sit. So that wasn't 300 or 400 kilometers away. That was only about 60 kilometers away. But that kitten found his way back, and he reached Sekhsaria from Ghaziabad, from Rajnagar. And when we both talk about it, I didn't know about this story of Panna tiger, and it gave me goosebumps when you were talking about it. What a brilliant story. Thank you for sharing it. Absolutely. So friends, if you've got questions to ask, please go ahead and ask Peeyush your questions so he can answer.
Mohit, I just went through the chat and I can see one question that I would like to answer. It's a simple one as to who made the puppets. So actually, I made the puppets, and they were of course assisted by the workshop that I was part of. But it's really very simple to do these puppets. They're far simpler than we think, and I'll be happy to engage with you more one-on-one if you'd like to discuss more. Thank you.
That'll be lovely if you can have a little session on how to do puppets and how to work with puppets. That'll be fantastic. So wildlife puppets, yeah, that'd be great. Friends, I'm going to share a file with you. While he was talking about stories, I suddenly remember a friend of mine, Nehal Sharma, had visited Pangot, and she'd written a small fictional story, Pangot Ki Chaya. Chaya is a small girl, and she's in Pangot, and she, so it's about her journey there. Go ahead and download this PDF. I just posted it right now because I found it in my computer, and I thought I'll share it with you all. Go ahead and download it and enjoy this read. It's very raw, but in one go, she wrote it. It's about 3 pages. You'll enjoy reading this. And but feel free to start writing stories. And I will be tomorrow morning. Everybody will get a replay link of this this presentation, and you'll also get Peeyush's links, his email ID. So feel free to connect with him, and also his telephone number, so that you can engage with him for his conservation things ahead. And then if you want to know more about our future webinars, I'm posting some links here, which you can sign up and you can be part of our future webinars. I'm committed to bringing more such webinars to you to sensitize people, to bring up issues, to bring up those beautiful things that our jungles have to offer and ecotourism has to offer. And if you want to co-host, if you got something very interesting, it's your burning desire to be here, go ahead and tell me, and I will ensure that a webinar goes out to the right kind of people for you. This is what my commitment is for everyone. And so what is the? I don't want to leave it at that, Peeyush. I want people to go deeper with you to the next step. So you and I need to discuss what is it that you're going to do with this audience, in the future. What would be the next step?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one is, of course, we all need to, at least I think that we need to build alliances and we need to work with people who are on ground. We need to work with institutions. Different people have different skill sets and different possibilities of engaging on this. So, what best suits you. You could be based on your skill set and your interest. I think we need to engage with people on ground. We need to do a lot of work in regional languages. We have a lot of stuff. I would say we are saturated with good material in English. There's very little in regional languages. There are challenges of access to the internet. Even internet literacy in some parts. So I feel it's very important to also engage with regional languages. Currently, I haven't really thought of this question. I think it's an important one. I should have thought of it earlier. But
So my interest is that there's a very important point that you just when you said that most of the conservation work, the real work happens on the ground. The real work happens with the people on the ground, the people who are working behind the scenes, right there and then, or people out in the field, right? So we're talking about, so I'm not discounting the power of urban conservation, because that is where the emissaries live. That is where all the power of showcasing lives. But the real work, which is the field work that happens on the ground, we need to engage with that a lot more. So when you're saying that you want to bring out things in regional languages and you want to empower that part, we need to look at it very, very seriously. I think ecotourism is one of the ways that can really be strengthened, because now there's a full science by GSCC and UNWTO to look at it, which is more sustainable and responsible and is inclusive. Where people from the urban areas don't go and become class teachers. They go and only initiate the process, and then they stand at the back to ensure that everything is going right, and it's the initiative of the local people to take things forward. So I like what you said, Peeyush. It was absolutely brilliant.
Mohit, I saw one question. I can't remember the name of the person, saying that do I work on clouded leopards? So I would be happy to help you with a similar set. This folding animal thing is actually pretty easy to do. Of course, the form varies a bit based on the sort of the body of the animal. I'll be happy to discuss. I've shared my email address and phone number, so please feel free to get in touch. I'll be more than happy to help you with a kit like we made for tigers and other animals.
Fantastic. I'll be sharing your coordinates with everyone, Peeyush, and we'll ask them to get in touch with you. So, friends, if you like this session and you've enjoyed this thing, please give a thumbs up to Peeyush and type yes and say bless you, Peeyush, bring us more as we go along. Yeah. So please type in the chat whatever that you like, for Peeyush. Thank you, Sunilji. Thank you, Hari. Thank you, Sham. Everyone, great. So lovely session, and I hope to see you again, Peeyush. I'm going to talk to you in a couple of days to take things forward. In the meantime, thank you for being here, ladies and gentlemen. Keep visiting for more webinars as I go along, and I will keep you more engaged. And don't worry about what is happening. It's the power of the universe, and we are not going to question any of that. Let it all happen. Yeah, let it all take its own course of things or whatever, and you just stay put, enjoy whatever is happening today. Thank you.
Mohit, if I can just also take a minute.
Yes, please. Sorry.
Yeah, so I would really like to thank Mohit and Asian Adventures. To be really honest with you, Mohit got in touch maybe a couple of weeks back, and I was very reluctant, saying that what have I done that I should be addressing such an august audience. And he was pushy and in a very polite way, saying that "Arey yaar, tum log aisa karoge to hum kaise kuch kar sakenge," kind of thing. So thanks, Mohit, for that push. I think we are in difficult times, but I think we have to keep our hope, and we have to do the best with what we have and what we can. There's a lot to do. Honestly, there's a lot to do, and there are lots of people doing really terrific work, and we don't have to do everything. We have to do what we can, and we have to, sometimes times are difficult, especially when you're working in the environment space. Things don't look great all the time, but we have to do what we have to do, I guess. And thanks, everybody. I've been seeing the messages in the chat box, and it's really very encouraging, very inspiring, motivates me a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, friends. Thank you, Peeyush.
Namaste.
See you again. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.